Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Commission for allowing me to present today. I'm proud to present an overview of this program and the successes and accomplishments that we have achieved over the past 10 years. I'd like to note that if you'll take a look at the opening two slides, that there's no pics of 26-point bucks or turkeys with their beards dragging the ground or 20-bird covey flushes of quail. And I note that because none of those would exist without good habitat and good planning. So in my opinion, habitat is the key to those pictures. So I'll start off. These are the things that I'm going to cover today in the presentation: where this partnership began, where the funding comes from for this partnership, and then I'll go into how we assist landowners on a daily basis, and then I'll recap some of the accomplishments that this group has had over the past 10 years. I'd like to make mention of the handouts that we gave all of the commissioners before the meeting, and also the thumb drives. Please take a look at these at your convenience. The thumb drives have some excellent videos that we put together over the past 10 years. Lots of good reference publications on there, and then even a copy of an example management plan that's something that we would put together for a landowner. So I just wanted to remind you of those handouts. We're all familiar with the agency mission statement, and I'll start by reading the first sentence. And TWRA's mission is to preserve, conserve, manage, protect, and enhance the fish and wildlife of the state and their habitats. And I put this up there and underline those statements just so that everyone would notice that this does not limit our efforts to state-owned lands, which our managers and technicians do an excellent job at managing and maintaining. But this statement, in my opinion, includes the entirety of the state of Tennessee. With that being said, you'll take a look at this map, and this is a map of, in red, are publicly owned lands in the state of Tennessee. And if you'll look, there's a whole lot of green on that map inside state borders. In fact, Tennessee is 90% privately owned. Reaching wildlife conservation goals is going to require partnerships with private landowners. Well, what does it take to get private landowners involved? It takes money, dollars. So enter the largest source of funding for voluntary incentive-based conservation on private lands, the Federal Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is put together by members of Congress and in part provides millions of dollars to states for ag and wildlife-related habitat projects on private lands. It began in 1933 and was titled the Agricultural Adjustment Act. It's authorized every 5 to 7 years, and today's Farm Bill is called the Agricultural Act of 2014 and will be expiring in September of 2018. So this slide, the main takeaway from this would be that little green piece of pie. This is what is in the 2014 Farm Bill. And the number that's most important, in my opinion, is nearly $58 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars worth of conservation to be put on the ground in the United States in this Farm Bill alone. So that's a pretty large number. So I've told you there's federal funding available to the states. An opportunity to help obtain and direct these funds for private land habitat projects in Tennessee was recognized by TWRA staff years ago. Thus began a partnership in the year 2000 with NRCS. We started with 3 NRCS biologist positions across the state that TWRA partially funded. They were funded for a 3-year term, and those terms ended in 2006. In 2006, those positions were permanently federally funded through NRCS, and we had 3 NRCS private lands biologists across the state. Once that ended, our portion of that, we decided it was time to start TWRA's private lands program. And so in 2007, that was born. We currently have 4 TWRA wildlife habitat biologists, and seeing such a great need for these positions, we partnered in 2013 along with NRCS and Quail Forever to create 3 more positions in the state that are Quail Forever habitat biologists. So I've told you where the funding is, I've told you how we started this program, and now I'm going to move into how we work with landowners. For most landowners, all these acronyms just look like a huge bowl of alphabet soup, and farm bill programs can be very complex and constantly changing, which I believe creates a need for trained biologists to walk landowners through these processes. Most landowners we see really just need a little guidance on how to do a project or how to get started. And most of those people have no idea that there's money available to them through programs. So just as the sign in the picture states, habitat is your key to wildlife. In my opinion, having wildlife habitat biologists to guide landowners through this process is the key to success. So how do landowners find us? Well, let's face it, everybody today has a smartphone or an iPad or a computer, and most of those people are all connected to social media. TWRA has come a long way over the past 5 to 10 years with our media outreach, with our website, with our connection to social media. We're involved with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, which are updated on a daily basis, and we post a lot of things on there. We get a lot of contacts through our website and through social media. Another way that we get contacts from landowners is when they visit the NRCS office. Landowners go in, and if their goals are wildlife based, when they speak to a district conservationist, then that's when we get the call from the NRCS staff. We come in and we support that staff, and we walk those landowners through and help develop plans for them. Another way, and by far one of the best ways that I've reached a lot of people, and I'm sure most of my cohorts have too, is landowners talk. Neighbors tell neighbors what's going on. And when we do a project with someone and it is successful, their neighbor wants to know what's going on and why they're not seeing all these deer and turkeys and their neighbor is. So we get a lot of word-of-mouth contacts. And then also by the many public events that we participate in throughout the year. One in particular is NWTF convention. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. You're looking at 50 to 60,000 people that don the doors in a 4-day period, and we have a very strong presence at this event. We get a lot of contacts through it. We put on many regional workshops throughout the year for landowners and for resource professionals, and then we also attend many club meetings throughout the year and speak at a lot of different events. So there's just a multitude of ways that landowners reach out to us or that we reach out to them. What is it we actually do with landowners? I actually got this question before we walked in the door today from one of the commissioners. Well, here we go. Here's what we do with landowners. We broke it down into a 4-step process. Number one is we have a consultation. We meet with those landowners. It usually starts with a phone call or an email, but is always followed up by a site visit. There's no substitute for ground truthing what somebody tells you. And so we all want to put our eyes on that piece of property, see how it lays, see what the different vegetation types are, and so we go from there after a site visit and a consultation. Then we move into planning. Planning occurs after the property has been assessed and the landowner's inventory has been assessed. And so planning is always based on the landowner's goals and objectives, and after the plan is developed, we look at any state and or federal cost share programs that could be identified to assist that landowner, and we guide the landowner through those funding options. So once we've consulted and we've developed a plan with the landowner, we move into the implementation phase of the project. You know, we assist the landowner with habitat implementation and management. And let me be very clear on this. We don't come out and do the job for them. The landowner has to have some skin in this game, and they've got to be willing to put forth the effort to implement that project or find somebody to help them implement that project. Now, we are there through that whole process to guide them with recommendations, calibrate spray rigs, set up drills for planning, help them pick out the right mixes and all that, but the landowner does have to have some skin in that game. So we move from implementation into evaluating our success. And so we always stay in contact with our landowners, and we discuss whether those practices are helping reach their intended goals or objectives. Although the majority of the landowners that we work with in Tennessee are deer and turkey people, let's face it, it's what pays the bills, and that's what most people want to shoot. Our habitat recommendations affect so many other species besides deer and turkey. Aquatic biodiversity and its protection is a huge issue in the state of Tennessee, as we're so blessed to have thousands of miles of freshwater streams and lakes, and some of these streams are among the most biologically diverse systems in the world. So we currently have a multi-agency initiative to improve water quality in the Elk and Duck River watersheds, and this initiative began in Elk River, where it assisted landowners at installing nearly 16 miles of habitat buffers using partner contributions of nearly $315,000. And this great start led us to expand that initiative into the Duck River watershed as well. So these buffer practices I mentioned, whether it be along waterways or on the edges of fields, create connectivity across the landscape for a multitude of wildlife species. The wildlife habitat biologists were also very active in helping create quail-specific practices in Tennessee under the CRP SAFE program. In Tennessee alone, there were approximately 10,200 acres of quail-friendly habitat put on the ground, and so that's quite a bit. Many of the landowners we deal with are agricultural producers. They have to make a dime in order to keep the farm. And so that could be either cattle production or row crop production, a multitude of ways that landowners need to get by. By incentivizing these landowners to convert their non-productive acres into wildlife habitat, I feel like we can make a significant difference in wildlife populations across the state. We pride ourselves on being current with today's wildlife science and relaying that information back to our landowners and other resource professionals. This is evident in the more than 200 plus professional presentations that we have been a part of in the past 10 plus years, and the more than 130 workshops that we have given during that time. This is the very reason why landowners and resource professionals call upon us regularly for assistance. Almost 7,000 times, in fact, in the past 10 years. Resource professionals include a whole host of entities. We assist U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're required to do threatened and endangered species surveys. We work with Tennessee Department of Forestry, helping them understand wildlife management objectives in timber and allowing us to understand forestry objectives in woodland acres, and also discussing the issues with prescribed fire. We work with NRCS planners on a daily basis. All of these requests from these resource professionals and landowners have led to more than 3,000 site visits over the past 10 years. The 4 TWRA wildlife habitat biologists have been responsible for 1,600 habitat management plans, recommending over 93,000 acres of habitat practices. Approximately 1,100 of these plans received federal funding for implementation. That is 43,000 actual acres of habitat that were federally funded through these biologists and these programs. Over 500 of these plans, the landowners just wanted technical guidance from a wildlife habitat biologist. These plans that we wrote included over another 50,000 acres of habitat practices that landowners potentially installed on their own dime. All they wanted was the guidance on how to get it done. Let me put that into perspective for you a little bit. Trousdale County is approximately 75,000 acres in size. So over the past 10 years, these biologists have installed more than an entire county's worth of habitat in the state of Tennessee. The wildlife habitat biologists are definitely habitat specialists. They assess what habitat types are critical for the success of the landowner's objectives and determine the best methods of management for these habitats. They know what practices need to be put on the ground. One of the ways that we have a huge impact on these wildlife dollars is by the many state, federal, and NGO committees that we serve upon. These committees are the governing entities that determine the methods and practices in which these dollars get applied on the ground level across our state. Our expertise of what works on the ground allows us to steer these methods and practices in the right direction. Currently, we have 2 large-scale research projects that we are collaborating on with UT and are working on a 3rd proposed project that could have huge impacts on bird conservation statewide and could potentially have a direct effect on NRCS policy. I put this slide up because I wanted you to see pictures of the current wildlife habitat biologists that are serving across the state. The top 4 are TWRA biologists, and the bottom 3 are our partner Quail Forever biologists. Take a good look because these habitat biologist positions allow TWRA to influence where the federal funding in Tennessee goes for wildlife, okay? This influence has had a huge impact over the past 10+ years. So much so that over the last 10 years, the total federal funding for wildlife practices in Tennessee was approximately $315 million. This equates over a 10+ year period to an average of almost $28 million a year for wildlife habitat in the state of Tennessee. Commissioners, you are leveraging $200,000 of state license dollars, along with approximately $300,000 of partner money. And we are getting $28 million a year of wildlife habitat on private land. Okay? I don't know about you, but that's a pretty good investment to me. And if any of you would like for me to manage your 401k, you come see me after the meeting. I would like to end on this slide showing the current biologist locations and their contact information. I would like to make mention of how extremely proud I am to work with such a fine group of biologists who pride themselves on staying current with today's wildlife science and then relaying that science back to the landowners and resource professionals of Tennessee so that they have the best opportunity to succeed in their conservation efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clint. Yeah, that's a massive return. So thank you for what you guys do and what a great resource for all the sportsmen in the state. I personally can speak to what Clint came out and looked at a piece of property my brother and I have, and so we've done the site work and the plan, and we're going to implement it this spring, and he guarantees me we'll see that 26-point buck, so I'm counting on it. So
well, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to invite Matt Walker up to say a few words from the perspective of NRCS about this partnership.
Please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce Matt Walker. Matt is the acting state conservationist for NRCS in Tennessee.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commission, for an opportunity to say a few words today. like Clint, I'm very proud of what we've been able to achieve over the past 10 years through the partnership. And very literally, as you see on the slide, we are planting seeds for wildlife conservation. Literally and figuratively, that's something that we're getting done out on the ground. So NRCS, we got our roots out of the Dust Bowl. 1935, we started as a Soil Conservation Service, SCS. Many of you have probably heard that acronym. 1994, we changed our name to reflect the change in the scope of the services we provide to private landowners. And that had a big role in changing our focus to wildlife in many areas. In 1999, NRCS offices had one biologist to support all 95 counties. We were stretched pretty thin. By 2003, we had 3 biologists to support the state. By 2018, we have 5 NRCS biologists and 7 partner biologists. We're gaining steam. This is the direction we hope to continue. So the need for partnership, you know, Clint mentioned the Farm Bill. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program is one of our primary programs through the Farm Bill. In 1999, we had about $3.1 million of funding. 2006, $8.1 million. 2017, last year, we had $34.1 million. 2018, our initial allocation is $25 million. We fully expect additional funding to put us well over the $30 million mark once again. Now, these numbers are impressive in the financial gains that we've made, but what's even more impressive is that we've had a declining workforce to put these funds on the ground. There's an inverse relationship between us. Funding increases, our folks, our boots on the ground have decreased. That's why this partnership is so critical to continue to put habitat on the ground. Also, TWRA habitat biologists are probably some of the most technically trained folks that we have. They have access to TWRA trainings, they have access to NRCS trainings. They get the best of both worlds. So in 2014, with the Farm Bill that came out then, there was a new federal law that required 5% of EQIP be used on wildlife-friendly conservation practices. Again, that's why we need boots on the ground to get this stuff implemented. There's talks now for the, well, hopefully what is the 2018-2019 Farm Bill on how much to dedicate to wildlife by federal law. So the need for partnership remains. Clint showed pictures earlier of the habitat biologists, but I'd like to ask them to stand, both the NRCS, the Quail Forever Partners, and the TWRA habitat biologists. If you would just stand. So you can see it's this handful of biologists. This is everybody we have statewide implementing these programs across the state. So we've certainly got our work cut out for us. And we're very, very proud of what we've accomplished. So with that, thank you. I'd like to say that we're excited what we can do in the future and hope we continue to gain momentum. Thanks.
And we thank you for the partnership. I think Commissioner Cox, you have a question?
Yeah, Clint, would you please explain the cost share, about how the program pays for it?
About how which
Where
program?
the money comes from, who pays your salary?
All right, TWRA pays a majority portion of 4 of these positions, and the other portion of that is paid for through NRCS. They provide us with some office space and some other incidentals and pay a cash portion for our positions. And the same goes for the Quail Forever biologist positions too. Quail Forever has some money in the game, and then NRCS pays a portion of their salaries too. So they are truly partner biologists.
Any other comments from the commission?
Again, I noted earlier on one of the slides that, you know, our portion that the commission is approving to forward is, you know, $200,000 basically for these 4 positions, and we're leveraging that to get about $28 million a year of habitat on the ground through federal programs. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. Any other comments or questions? Oh, thank you, Clint.
thank you.
How about we